Good morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. What is crack-a-lackin'? Welcome back and happy Taco Thursday. Because I can say it. I'm in charge here. Good morning again. We're going to dive into it. We're going to take some time to get you guys dialed in and prepared for today's session. So before we do dive into it, make sure you hit me with a big old good morning as always. Tom, what's up, brother? Good morning, man. I see a couple other beautiful men up in here as well. Steve, what's up? Mike, the Sizzler, Kevin. What's going on, guys? Good morning. Corey, what's up, buddy? Mr. Mike, he's ready to get it. All right, so we're good. We're live. You guys got the audio. We're crystal clear, ready to dive into it. So, without further ado, what do we got going on for today? So, we just had PPI data drop. So, let's go take a look at PPI data. So, we had producer price index month over month. We came in higher than last month, but still lower than the forecast. We came in at 0.1%. We look at PPI year over year, came in at 2.6%. That was in line with the forecast, slightly up from last month. But let's go look at core PPI as well. Month over month, 0.1% lower than the forecast, still higher than previous. And then year over year, came in lower than the forecast. Again, still a bit higher than the previous as well. I mean, pretty much same thing we saw with CPI yesterday. CPI data hit lower than the forecast, but still a tick above the previous read. And market loved it. Market saw a nice little pop on up, and then gave it all back towards the end of the day. So what are we going to have today on the SPY? We get to see the market push on up because we got good PPI data and just give it all back towards the end of the day. I don't know, but we shall see. So you had PPI 830. We're good to go on that. And then what else do we got for today? We have nothing else, guys. We are in the clear. So let's go right to the SPY and let's talk about what we got going on for today's session, guys. All right, so I've already done the SPY analysis off the daily. So we'll be able to rip through the SPY, then go right to the Qs, and then do some top-down analysis on QQQ. Before that, let's go into our lower time frames and see if we have any lower time frame zones of supply and demand. So right now we're on a 4-hour time frame here on the SPY, and we're looking for any 4-hour supply and demand. So we have this 4-hour demand sitting down here. All right, so we see we have this rally, base, rally. So nice 4-hour demand candle sitting down here between 594.60 to 595.45. And take note of where that demand zone is, right? Demand lines up with one of our daily zones of support here on the SPY. And so we do have this daily zone of support sitting there at 595.13 to 595.59. That's a key daily zone of support, and we see that we have some 4-hour demand sitting right at that support level. So that's going to be a great area to get long and play calls down around 595 if the SPY gets there. Do we have any other areas of demand? Yeah, we got this nice little drop, base, rally. So we can come in here and mark up that 4-hour demand zone down here as well. So we have 2 lower zones of demand. Do we have any supply? Naturally, I see this nice little 4-hour base before the gap down this morning. But let's get down into the lower time frames and see what we look like on the lower time frames. So we are done on the 4-hour. Let's go into a 1-hour time frame. Let's go down and look at some 1-hour demand down below. There's your drop, base, rally. So that's going to be your 1-hour demand zone, chilling down at 595. So that 595 area is looking pretty sweet. It's looking great. It looks phenomenal. You got a daily zone of support. You got 4-hour, 1-hour overlapping demand, and all of that lines up at like 595.20. So if we ever see the SPY's price get down to 595.20, I'm going to play calls. 100%. I will be getting calls down at that 595.20. That's a high probability area, guys. All right, let's go down further and see if we have any 1 hour demand. We do. Rally, base, rally. So look at that nice tight little 1 hour that lines up inside of the 4 hour. That also sits right at our next lower zone of support. So we have this daily zone of support down around 592.70 to 593.21. We have 4 hour demand and we have 1 hour demand that line up at that daily zone. So another great area that if price gets to it, boop, we're looking to play some calls there. All right, what do we have to the upside on the 1 hour time frame? Do we have anything that really just stands out? I mean, nice drop yesterday. Little bit of this rally base drop, but the impulse wasn't anything spectacular. We had this little rally base gap down. I would still tread lightly with any kind of, supply in this region. So nothing that I see that I would throw out for today on the SPY. Let's go finish this up on a 30-minute, baby. What do we got on a 30-minute? 30-minute demand is going to be the same as the hour. Looking at the 30-minute demand down here, it's pretty much the same as the hour. So we're good to go on lower demand zones. And do we have anything on a 30-minute time frame that stands out? Maybe a little downtrend? Nah, not really. There could be a downtrend there. Let's go into a 15 and see if we have a different high to run that trend line off of. Yeah, we could run it off that high here. We connect all of these highs. We get another little connection here towards the end of the day. 0.3 of the downtrend. We hit it. We drop. So we would still be able to see this trend line respected if we get back into it. So let's go ahead and run a downtrend off these lower highs from yesterday. And we see that at some point, it would be a confluence, right? If we get all the way back up to that 602 zone of resistance, we're going to have that downtrend sitting right there as well. So got a nice little downtrend from yesterday's session. And I don't really see anything else, guys. So we are done on the spot. So key zone for today, guys. This is your LITS, your LITS, your line in the sand. This is your make or break on the SPY. That zone is 597.35 to 597.89. That is a key daily zone of support. It's a make or break. Price comes down into it here in pre-market. We hit it. We bounce. Where do we bounce to? Our next daily zone of resistance between 599.22 to 599.65. We come up to that zone of resistance. What do? We hit it. We drop. Where do we come back to? That daily zone of support, our line in the sand. What do we see happen? We hold it. We pop. Where are we pushing up to right now? That daily zone of resistance. So this is going to be a pretty important area here on the SPY. Is that zone between 599.22 to 599.65. What's the SPY going to do? If we break above that zone, we pull back into it and we see it holding as intraday support, we'll play calls. Where to? Our next daily zone of resistance. Where's that at? It is up here between $600.82 to 601.24. All right, so that's going to be plan number one if we break that 599 zone. And if we hold it, we'll get long to that 601 zone. But let's say we cannot break that 599 zone. And let's say we see a short setting up off that daily zone of resistance. What would we do? Simply look to take puts if we see a short setting up off that daily zone of resistance. Where to? Our next daily zone of support, which is that LITS, our line in the sand down around that 597 level. So really got to see what the SPY does off of these three main areas of support resistance that we're closest to right now at this point in time. And then the best of the best trade for today, the A+ setup that I will be getting in definitely putting my money where my mouth is if we ever get down to that 525. Yeah, 525. That'd be nice. Yeah, 525. 595.20. Right? That's where we have our next daily zone of support. We have some 30 minutes, 1 hour, 4 hour demand that all lines up at that daily zone of support. And that puts you at 595.25 to the penny. That is the best area to play calls today. So if price for any reason gets down to that area, I'm getting in. I'm definitely playing calls. Stops underneath that demand zone, and we're going to target that 597 zone of resistance. We can see that'll be pretty good risk reward. So that is the SPY. Ladies and gentlemen, we are all set, ready to rock for today. You did not take that trade on Oracle puts. Let's go look at Oracle. We had earnings. Did we? Look at that. Boop. Just right up through it. Yeah, I didn't like how expensive they were anyway. That was the biggest thing. I didn't really care for how expensive they were. But did we get that $13 move to the upside? We closed at 176. We're at 192. That's a $15 pop to the upside. There is your plus or minus 13 buckarooskies on Oracle. So good stuff that we didn't take it. I couldn't get around that trade because the premiums were just a little too jacked for a riskier earnings play. So all right, so SPY, we're good. Let's go take a look at QQQ and do the same thing we just did on the SPY. Top-down analysis, get an idea of where the best trades are going to be taking place, and get clear on that. So we're good. Ready to rock. We're prepared. Then we just got to wait for the market to open, wait for the market to get to a key level, and then we start taking trades. So what do we got on the Qs? Qs, we are way off yesterday's highs. We closed at 532.41 yesterday. We are still down about $1.50 here in pre-market. So we're still, right now at this time, looking like we're going to be gapping down. But right on the daily, and the objective is to find our most significant daily zones of support and resistance. And so that's what we're doing. So here we go. This is going to be a nice little dialed-in zone here on QQQ. And that zone is between 531.48 to 532.54. Why, Josh? Why is that a great zone? High day, rejection. High day, big rejection. Low day, big bounce. High day, big drop on off. High day, drop. High day, drop. We hit it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different times, and we've seen some pretty sharp moves away from that zone, right? Look at this day here. We gapped up. We pushed, put in this high day at the zone, and then dumped big time. Big drop to the downside. So we got some significant moves off that zone, and we got quite a few hits. So that's going to be a nice little zone of resistance for today. And it's also right up against yesterday's close. So naturally, what could we see on the Qs? The Qs could gap down, push up into that zone of resistance, into yesterday's close, fill the gap, and then see what? A gap fill rejection, and see sellers step on it. So that's going to be a pretty key area of resistance to the upside, is that daily zone between 531.78 to 532.54, and then yesterday's close. Lots of resistance here, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of resistance. So, yeah, I'll look to get short up there. You know, if we gap down, close the gap, hit resistance, can't break it, I'll be getting short around that 532.40 mark on the Qs. But let's say we break that level, we hold it, and we start pushing to the upside. Would we get long? Yeah. Where to? We would get long back up to this zone between 533.83 to 534.12. So that's where we'd be looking to get long up to. That's your next daily zone of resistance. But again, let's say we gap down, come up, close the gap, hit it, get rejected, and we start to drop. Where would we get short to? Well, we got to go find our next daily zone of what? Support. Let's go ahead and do it. So I see that this is going to be a very significant zone here on the Qs. Let me just tighten that zone up before I give it to you. Oh, no, I just jacked the entire thing up. Here we go. We're trying to drag the bottom down. Good job, Josh. You know how to use a mouse. All right. That lower zone is between 528.73 to 529.22. So that gives us 3 pretty significant levels for today. Wow, would you look at that? Surprising. You know, what area did we come down to in pre-market and hold a support? That 529 zone. We hit it, we bounce. Come back down to it again. We hit it, we bounce. Interesting. Who would have thought? All right, so we got lower zone of support, top resistance, top resistance. We do need to go get one more lower zone for today. So where's that final lower zone of support going to be at? Pop, 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 pop. All right, it's going to be down here. So your next lower zone of daily support to the downside will be... Just bear with me, guys. I'm dying to get it in for you. You want me to give you the right zone, or you want me to give you a shitty zone? Well, I would expect you would want the right zone. All right. It is down here between 525.43 to 526.05. That is your next lower zone of support. So we got 2 lower zones, 2 top zones. Look at where the market's at right now. We should be pretty good. You know, if we break that 532 zone, we hold it. We know we're getting long up to that 534. We could probably go grab one more top zone if we wanted to the upside. But we'll grab that once market opens. If we see the market's pushing on up, we'll just go grab it at that time and we'll be set. We do have a downtrend off these highs from yesterday. So we should go ahead and connect a little downtrend here off of these lower highs. And it looks like we've already broke that downtrend. So check it out. High, drop, lower highs, drop, lower highs, drop. So we have a clear downtrend from yesterday. It was clearly being respected as resistance, and we just broke it here in pre-market. So do we hold the trend line now as support and push higher? We'll just have to see. Sometimes we get back inside the trend line, revalidate it as resistance, and we continue to move lower. So if we ever get back below that downtrend and see it stay below that downtrend, that looks pretty weak, and I would expect to see some downside on the Qs. But if we are indeed going to hold the break of the downtrends, we could absolutely see a little bit more upside. So get that downtrend thrown up on QQQ off those lower highs from yesterday. We've done all of our daily analysis. We don't have any valid daily areas of supply or demand. So we're going to go right down into a 4-hour time frame. And we're going to look at the 4-hour and see, do we have any valid areas of 4-hour supply or demand? Yeah, I mean, you got this little drop base rally. Then you see this rally base rally. We already know we're going to have some lower demand down there. But those zones are going to be pretty big. So I'm going to go ahead and just flip it down into a 1-hour and see what my 1-hour looks like, knowing that we're going to have it sitting near that 4-hour demand anyway. So there is your 1-hour demand zone. Again, we have this nice little 1-hour drop base rally. So there is your 1-hour demand. Then we do have this little rally base rally formation. Again, that took place in after hours. How much volume drove that price action to the upside? 30,000 shares. So I'm going to tread lightly with that zone because that demand zone was just created in after hours on lower volume. But this zone here was driven with a lot more volume. I mean, 200,000 shares exploding out of that zone. So at least we see more volume at this period of time compared to what we saw down here. So if there are going to be unfilled orders left over, which zone do I expect there to be a majority of unfilled orders? Where we had 200,000 shares traded or where we had 30,000 shares traded? Well, probably the area where there was more volume, right? More shares being exchanged. So I am going to do away with that lower zone for that reason, but I'm definitely going to eyeball that top zone of demand. See if we come down to it, see if we hit it, see if we pop, and maybe there's a trade-off of it. Do we have any 1-hour supply? No, we don't. Let's go to a 30-minute time frame. What do we have on a 30? Anything? No. No, we don't. We're good. Yeah, so we're good on the cues. Let's go ahead and build those plans. So you already know what the first plan is. If we gap down today, right? So if we open lower and we see the cues push up into that daily zone of resistance and we hit yesterday's close and we fill the gap from the gap down today, I'm looking to play puts and get short right around this 532.40 level and play the short back down to that 529 zone of support. That's game plan number one. Game plan number two is if we see buyers in control today. We see a strong break back above that zone of resistance. I'll just wait and see. Do we back test it and hold it as support? If we see the break, if we see the retest, and we have good price action off that daily zone and we're holding it as intraday support, I'll simply get long off that 532 zone and just play it up to that 534 zone. That's going to be simple game plan number two here on the cues. And then final game plan is, what do we do at that 529 zone? Because that is a make or break on QQQ. That's going to be the LITS, L-I-T-S, for today. That is your make or break. So if we come back down into that 529 zone and we hold it, we'll just get long and play it from zone to zone. But if we ever see price fall below that 529 zone and we retest it and stay below it, then I'm going to get short down into some of that 1 hour demand. And that 1 hour demand is right around like 526, 527 there on QQQ. All right, so we're all set on the cues. Between the SPY and the cues, which one do I like the most based on the analysis and based on the technicals? Which zone is the most dialed? Well, I'm definitely digging this top zone right here. And it's right up against yesterday's close at 601.36. That's a more significant zone. We got some more open spacing in between these zones compared to the cues. Yeah, I'd say they're pretty equal. I think we got good potential on the cues and the SPY. I wouldn't say the SPY looks 10 times better than the cues or vice versa. They both look pretty good. But again, we're all set. Pretty much the same plan still. If we see the SPY gap down, we're looking to see if we can close the gap into daily resistance and get rejected. That's the best of the best trade that could possibly set up today. And that would be all over puts if we set up. And same thing with the cues. If we gap down, push up, close that gap into resistance, same thing. I'm looking to get short and play puts to the downside. All right, you guys have any questions about the SPY or the cues? If not, let's go look at some individual stocks for today. Yeah, NQ hitting a daily demand zone, pre-market, June 9th. We can do some analysis on NQ. Abso-freaking-lutely. Always start on the daily time frame and just see if there's anything on the daily that stands out. I mean, you had that wee little daily, little basing candle like sitting right there. Little rally base rally. Price comes back down, hits some of those unfilled orders. Price comes all the way into daily demand. Actually, just this morning, we hit 100% of it. We popped. So we see that little daily demand zone. You said you noticed it on a lower time frame? Oh, daily. Yeah, that was the daily. Then we came down and we hit the 4-hour demand that was sitting right here as well. So we had drop base rally, 4-hour demand sitting inside of daily demand. This was the remaining piece of 4-hour and daily. Price comes down into it this morning. We hit it. We pop out. So that demand zone is gone. Why is it gone? Well, that mother heifer has been beaten up, right? That zone has been absolutely beaten up over the past couple of days. So good analysis, solid demand zone. We got some overlap on the 4-hour. Price comes down, hits the overlap, takes out those unfilled orders, pops to the upside. Nice little trade there. Put a fork in it. That's it. We are going to, remove that daily demand zone now. All right, what else are we looking at today, guys? Did the market crash? It pulled back pretty violently back in April. Very violent drop. What was the first one? Apple? Yeah, Apple's daily is like just disgusting. I don't see a whole lot when I look at Apple on a daily. And I always start on a daily. All of my trades are based on high time frame zones of support resistance, supply demand, gaps. If I don't see anything on a daily, I typically don't day trade the stock if we're not setting up off of a key daily area. And so the only thing that I see on Apple is the gap to get filled. So we had this gap from May 23rd up to May 27th. We had this gap up. Price came down and filled about 50% of the gap and then pushed higher. So there's still about 50% of this gap remaining that could get filled, and then we could see the bounce to the upside. That's the only thing that stands out to me on Apple. And so we have this lower gap between 195.32 to 196.77. So how would I look to trade Apple? I would wait for Apple to come down, fill that daily gap, and then play calls for a gap fill bounce off that 195.32. So the bottom of the gap, again, is at 195.32. That is the only thing that I see on Apple. Gap fill bounce. How do you confirm when to enter off support, price action, and confluence? So if you just have a key daily zone of support and price is at it, how do you confirm the trade? Based on reading price action, number one. But let's say you have additional confluence that lines up at that daily zone. So maybe you have an uptrend support that's sitting at the daily zone. Let's say you have some demand that's sitting at that daily zone as well. That would give you 3 confluences to take that trade. So you would just need to learn how to assess OEPs, and OEP stands for optimal entry point, how to assess an OEP utilizing those confluences if you do have multiple confluence at that support zone. But like I said, if it's just a support zone that we're coming into, you need to learn how to read price action to confirm the trade. Tesla. What's up with Tesla today? Oh, Tesla. Tesla was a nice hit yesterday, guys. For the gap fill rejection. We got inside the gap, stayed inside the gap. Initially came down pretty close for the fill. So that was a decent trade yesterday on Tesla. But what else do we got? Let's go right to the daily on Tesla and let's pick this bad boy apart. Are we gapping down today? We are kind of flat. No. Where did we close yesterday? 326. We're at 323. So we got about a $3 gap down off yesterday's close. We have this gap to the downside on Tesla. So check it. We got this daily gap down here. So let's go ahead and mark it up. And so that was the gap that was created from Monday into Tuesday. So we got this daily gap on Tesla. That's sitting down here between, if I can get the damn thing to click. There we go. Bottom of the gap is at 308.58. And then top of the gap is at 314.96. So we got this daily gap down below. And we got some daily supply resting up here. So go ahead and just look at where these two key levels are at. You got key supply, and you got a very key gap level. Is there anything else in between those two significant zones, those two significant areas on the chart? I don't really see a whole lot. I mean, we had this zone of resistance here on Tesla. We came up into it yesterday. We hit it as high a day. We also hit the gap. We dropped. So that was a nice little zone of resistance on Tesla. But realistically, there's nothing else that really stands out in between supply, in between the gap. We just have that daily zone of resistance that's sitting right here between 332.27 to 334.77. So where are we at pre-market? Are we closer to resistance or are we closer to the gap? Well, we're definitely closer to the gap at this point in time. So here's how I would trade Tesla today. If we see Tesla continue to drop on off and we get inside of this lower gap and we fall below 314.96 and we get inside the gap, as long as we stay inside of this gap and hold below 314.96 as resistance, we would play puts down to the bottom of the gap at 308.58. All right, so that's game plan one on Tesla, is a gap fill short. But let's say we come down and fill the gap today, and we hit that 308.58. That's the bottom of the gap, and let's say the gap's filled. We could trade calls, and we could play this long and play calls for a gap fill bounce off that 308.58 back up to that 314.96. So we could absolutely look for a gap fill bounce as well on Tesla. But that's the only thing that stands out to me, man. You got daily supply, got a daily zone of resistance, and then you got a daily gap. And there is nothing else in between that just, stands out and slaps you in the face. So sit back, be patient. If Tesla gets down into that lower gap level, there's a couple of different ways you can trade it. Number one, gap fill short. Number two, the gap fill bounce. All right, what else? Yeah, Ben, absolutely. So we hit on Tesla, we hit on Apple. What else we got? Moo. We got some Micron. I haven't looked at Micron in a while, so let's go look at it. Probably moving big with like Nvidia, Intel this week. Yeah, had a nice little pop when we saw pop across the board. Stock's looking good. I mean, it's definitely pushing on up with some strength. I mean, looks really nice. But let's go right into let's actually go into like a monthly on INTC. No, on Micron. My bad. Go into a monthly and see if there's anything on a monthly that stands out. No. Let's go into a weekly and see if there's anything on a weekly that stands out. You do have this little weekly supply. Got that little drop-based drop formation. Prices come up several times and hit it. Hit it. Supply. Hit those on foot orders, pop out. So I would even just naturally bring my supply zone up and only look at the area of supply that has not been hit, but we're hitting it this week. So we've already ran up, pierced above some of that supply. So that may be mitigated. We may completely remove that supply zone altogether. Your next supply zone is not until you get way up here into like the 130s. So there's a lot of room if we get through that supply zone until we get up to like the 130s on Micron. But there is a very significant region of resistance. I mean, yeah, there's supply, but we even see that there's a pretty significant zone of resistance that's been created just over the past, few months in this region here. So we're going to flip this down into a daily, and now we're going to do some daily support resistance analysis and, see what else we have. Well, there's a gap that stands out on Micron. So there's a big daily gap up here. That's up around 122.64 to 127.41. So you got that pretty big daily gap that was created back in July of last year. So we got this gap to the upside. We're currently hitting that weekly supply zone. We see price hit it yesterday. We're hitting weekly supply. We got that daily gap to the upside, and then we got weekly supply way up in the 130s. Where is Micron right now? We are gapping down a little bit. I mean, we completely beat up that entire supply zone yesterday, but we didn't close above it. We wicked above it, but we technically didn't close above it. So could price still fall out of some of this remaining weekly supply and we see a drop to the downside today? Absolutely. 100%. But let's see if we have any additional confluence to strategically take a trade up here on Micron. So we know we have some weekly supply, but I got this really dialed in zone of daily support resistance. And this is an area that's been hit many, many times in the past. So we're going to have this daily zone of support resistance between 114.11 to 114.81. And then again, we have that weekly supply zone that sits right above that daily zone of support resistance. So that's going to be a pretty key level here on Micron. That's going to be the lits. That's a make or break. And then to the downside, where could we see Micron go to the downside? I mean, we got this big gap down around 104, 106. There's this big daily gap. But there's going to be other areas to the upside prior to getting to that daily gap. For example, this is going to be a pretty significant zone of support to the downside here on Micron. And that's going to be down here between 110.69 to 111.40. So we got daily zone of support. We have that line in the sand. We have that weekly supply zone. We've done pretty much all of the higher time frame analysis that we can do. Right? Weekly time frame, down into the daily, finding support resistance, identifying gaps. We're good. So now we're going to go ahead and flip Micron down into some of the lower time frames and start to build some plans for today. So what would I need to see to take a trade on Micron? Well, here's what I would need to see. I would need to see Micron fall out of supply and be like, okay, cool. It's still being validated. It's still being respected. We fell out of supply. I'd also need to see it fall below that daily zone of support, that line in the sand zone between 114.11 to 114.81. So I would need to see it fall out of supply, actually see some movement to the downside, come below that zone of daily support, that lits, and then simply retest the daily zone as resistance today. That's all I would need to see is fall out of supply, retest that daily zone that's intraday resistance, and then I would play puts all day, every day on Micron and play puts down to 111. So if that's what we see Micron doing today, I would play puts for the crack, the retest, the next leg down out of some of that weekly supply. That's Micron, buddy. You good on Micron, man? Sup, J-Dog? What's up, buddy? What's going on? Who asked about Micron? Hopefully you're good on that. Flacco. That's Micron, dude. So, I mean, honestly, Micron doesn't look bad. Let's throw that on the list for today. Micron got some potential. Tesla, maybe down inside that gap. We got some potential there. What were the other ones we looked at? We looked at Apple. It looked okay. It was like, eh. Tesla, Micron looks decent.